for a very, very long time. There was no sound. An interesting thing that happened to the 13 of us, at that point, we were all compelled to pose in a group hug and wave and smile for a picture. And I have no idea why we did that, except we just did. And that was probably the biggest light that I've seen, most interesting. And at that point, after our picture was taken, the light just backed off. It went between Table Rock and Hawksbill and on down toward Morganton, and that was the last that we saw it that night.
Now, when you say when it was on the mountain, it was physically miles away and then came all the way to you?
Oh, yes. Chris, you have sort of calculated from Wiseman's View to the tip of Table Rock.
You're looking directly across the gorge in the direction of Brown Mountain, and the distance across the gorge would be about 1.25 miles. And there are two peaks, Hawksbill to the left, Table Rock to the right, and the traditional view is between those, 8 miles in the distance to Brown Mountain. What Cindy is describing is as light activity in the gorge, much closer, within, originating maybe 1 mile away, 1.25 miles away on these two nearby peaks.
Wow. So it moved, and the reason I'm saying is because in this case, if it were a plasma that was just, locally gases coming up and dispersing, why would it come and hover? Because the source of the electromagnet from underneath or from the earth or from plates would be in one locale. It wouldn't have the ability to move. I wouldn't think.
And it wouldn't move from the tip of Table Rock toward Hawksbill and stop and then come straight at us.
Yeah, I think that is the one thing that has intrigued all three of us, is what seems to be the deliberate, intentional behavior of the lights. There have been reports of them chasing people, of coming close to people and then moving overhead and passing on. There just seems to be some sort of an awareness there, a consciousness, to where they act very deliberately. And to me, that is what is the most intriguing thing, that there's a consciousness present.
And has there been, obviously here in North Carolina, has there been a similar experience for other people? And Chris, if you could tell us about the other places, either in the state or nationally, internationally, that perhaps in Ireland or other places where people have seen and experienced, and to what different degrees were their experiences?
Well, I'd love to. Let me make a brief trip around the globe, starting in Ireland. My literary researches with William Butler Yeats turned up an amazing instance in his autobiography when he was a young man in this seaport village of Sligo on the west coast. He had been brought up in an atmosphere of fairy tales and legends and so on, and he was out one evening with a cousin near a very prominent peak called Knocknarea. It has a huge stone cairn on the top where they say a warrior queen named Maeve is buried, and it's a very fabled mountain in the Irish lore. He was out there one night, and he and his cousin saw a mysterious light moving back and forth across the base of it, and he happened to have the presence of mind to take out his pocket watch and time the ascent of the light. It was a glowing ball, and it made it to the summit of the mountain, up 1,000 feet or so, in 5 minutes. And he saw similar lights out in the Irish countryside, and most of what he was hearing from the people thereabouts was not that they were ghosts, but that they were fairies and people from the invisible kingdom and so on. So it was first reading that encounter in his autobiography that made me interested in something that was going on in my own backyard. In Scotland, there was a very interesting man named Robert Kirk, who wrote in the late 1600s a book called The Secret Commonwealth. And in the lowlands of Scotland, similar lights had been seen. And he claimed that it was spiritual beings that made themselves a body out of what he called congealed air, and that these were very often mischievous beings, that they would steal children and throw little elf bolts, which were actually arrowheads at people, and that they were to be avoided like the plague. But his description of the lights seemed to be very similar to what we hear reported in western North Carolina. They would appear frosty, clear fall evenings between 8 and 10 o'clock and so on, and seemed to move as though with deliberation across the countryside. In Germany and Denmark, such lights have been seen, and usually there are legends to account for them. In some places it's the spirit of an unburied child. In Germany, there's an interesting account that says it's a ghost who's been disturbed by someone changing land boundaries. In Australia, we have a a light that appears in the desert in West Queensland and moves around very mysteriously. And of course, just as in Brown Mountain, there are paranormal explanations that it's the ghosts of people waiting to leave Earth. The scientists say that it is an optical illusion caused by the diffraction of light between hot and cold planes of air. Lights